Right, ladies and gentlemen, a different video for a change. And when I was traveling through Israel, I came across Daniel, and Daniel works for an NGO. And what they do is they basically go into African countries like South Africa. They do a lot of work in South Africa, and they give free equipment that purifies water. But Daniel's testimony of how it is actually dealing with South Africa and providing this very critical service to many of the underprivileged was, well, telling. Hi, Daniel. Thank you for taking the time to actually talk to my audience about your experiences here.
Hi, Baron. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about what you do and the company you work for.
So basically what we do for the NGO which I work for, basically we provide water and electricity to rural villages throughout Africa. And basically we're providing infrastructure. We work only in rural areas and places where the local government has not provided the basic utilities to the people living in the rural areas. We work throughout Africa. We work in South Africa, Cameroon, Malawi, Uganda, Tanzania, and Zambia. And obviously through my experience, we've got lots of interaction with the local government, sometimes on the national level, more often on the municipal level. And it's obviously very interesting being an NGO providing basic utilities to a country. You sort of have an insight into how things work or don't work. And, that's something which is very interesting.
So you told me when I was in Israel that effectively you provide the services in South Africa and you do it for free, and you train local communities up to be able to self-service it. But the South African government is not keen on any Israeli NGO making or allowing any of the local communities to know that the services that's been provided to them is from, well, Israel. Is that correct?
Not 100%. So how it works is that we do go to the local municipalities and not the local rural villages, and do provide them with water. We haven't had really much official interaction with the national government, and we have not been told by anyone officially that we should be hiding our Israeli identity. So that has never been said to us on an official basis, but it's sort of a internal discussion and sort of approach we've taken in order that we can focus on the positive that we're doing and not draw attention to any of the political complications.
So how exactly does it work? So you go into these communities and you put infrastructure in place to provide water. Tell me a little bit about the infrastructure you provide.
Okay, so first of all, we only go to rural villages which do not have any access to clean water whatsoever. So we're going to communities which are using open sources, very often the same sort of water sources which are being used by cattle and, which are definitely not clean, and, have different kinds of, biochemical or chemical issues. So what we do is we'll find a community which suits our parameters in order for us to work in that community. Once we've identified a community which does not have access to clean water and it fulfills our requirements, we will start off by speaking with the local chief or whoever's in charge of that community, together with the landowner, because we obviously want to make sure that everyone's interests are aligned and that there's not any issues. So originally we'll speak to the landowner and to the representatives of the community. Very often, again, we'll speak to the municipality or get, according to the South African legislation, every time you have to register a borehole or there's some sort of documentation which needs to get done. So, we're obviously completely compliant with all of that stuff. But basically, once we've got all of our eggs in a row, we'll go to a community and we'll start drilling in order to find a viable borehole. Once we've found a viable borehole, then we will basically check that it is good enough for long-term sustainability to sustain the village, which means that obviously that the water quality is of a high quality for clean drinking water, that the aquifer and the borehole is able to sustain the village, because you don't want to go to a borehole on aquifer which has limited water source and it's not replenishing itself. So we do sort of all of these tests in order to make sure that the borehole is viable for long-term sustainability for the village. And then with local contractors, and it's important to say that we do, all of the contractors we use on the ground are local, and we also have local staff in all of the countries we work in, including South Africa. As we say, local is lekker. And then we start the construction of a water tower with distribution taps in order to make sure that everyone in the village has access to clean drinking water. And the one point which is important, which you previously touched on, is because long-term sustainability is important to us. One of the things we do in every single project is we take 10 local representatives from the village, 5 men and 5 women, and we actually tell the local contractors that they need to pay them a salary, and they are actively involved in the creation of the tower and the distribution points and the taps and everything. And they're the local people from the village. And the reason for that is that although we do visit the villages and help with the maintenance, if there's smaller maintenance which needs to get done, we don't want the local villagers to be reliant on us. We want them to be as sustainable as possible. And our hope is by training local members of the community to understand how the system works and to actively be involved in the building of it, that they will be able to handle, minor maintenance needs without the need to, wait till we come to do our general check that we do in all of our projects.
So it was interesting because, as you said, you train local communities to look after the infrastructure that you put in place. How many of these have you actually done now across South Africa?
Sure. So throughout, on the top of my head, projects throughout Africa is roughly just under 1,300, including water and electricity projects. But specifically in South Africa, if my memory serves me correct, it'll be about 150, roughly about in the 150 mark.
Okay. So what is the South African government specifically, what's their approach to the work that you do?
So I don't think the South African government has a specific approach to the work we're doing, because in the sense we're sort of filling the void. We're working in the places where the government has not been able to reach and to provide clean drinking water to these communities. So we do not have sort of that official their approach to our work because we're filling the void in the places where they're lacking. As best as possible, we do try our best to speak to the local municipalities and make them aware of the work we're doing, because obviously we're trying to do as best we can to the local people who do not have it. We're looking not to cause any issues. We're looking for partnerships. We're looking to make sure that people have access to clean drinking water. So any opportunity we do have for partnerships with local municipalities, working together, being able to actually help the end user, we will do it. But it's a lot more on the more local municipal level.
And what is the municipalities what's their approach to you? Because obviously they know you're an Israeli NGO, right? And as you know, South Africa is not exactly entirely friendly with Israel. So what is the general approach then from the municipalities? Are they receptive to you or hostile?
A lot of the time they don't know that we are based in an Israeli NGO, because just to explain that we are even though our headquarters is in Israel, we are locally incorporated in each one of the countries which we come from. So even though the headquarters is in Israel, we obviously are incorporated everywhere. To be honest, it depends. Sort of the feedback. A general approach we have is that we're just trying to do the best for the people on the ground. And, despite the fact that I'm personally exceptionally Zionist and, proud about, being Zionist and living in Israel, our work at the organization, is we're focusing on to actually just try to help the people on the ground. So we're not looking for fights. We're not looking to cause any issues. But a lot of the times, there are some times where it has come up and it has been used. They've attempted to use it against us, whether it be on the municipal level or whether it be on the sort of traditional level. There's sometimes, traditional leaders in these sort of traditional areas, which is not necessarily only the municipality who's involved as a key player, but, traditional leaders. But more often than not, because we, at the end of the day, and this is sort of, I talk about, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If people don't have water or people don't have access to basic utilities, sort of sometimes the other things are less important.
Yeah.
One of the people I worked with in the Israel South Africa Chamber of Commerce, she always used to say to me that politics divides people and commerce brings people together. And the idea is, politics tries to find the differences and to create friction between different people. But the majority of people in this world just want to live a good, decent, respectful life. And if these people who don't have, the average person in the rural villages, if they do not have access to basic utilities and we're able to come and fulfill that need, so the politics is sort of less relevant, and it's not something we try and focus on, because of our driven vision of bringing, clean water to people throughout Africa.
Yeah, but I mean, I also know that on the practicality point of view, I suppose if you ever mention it to anybody that you're Israeli, they almost would be like they prefer not to have clean water than to be seen collaborating. Am I right?
So I think it depends on which level you're speaking on. If I think it depends. If you're speaking to the end user, someone who doesn't have water, so I don't think they would be concerned wherever you're coming from, because we're providing them with the basic need. When you start working your way up the ladder, towards different, and sort of entering the realm of politics, so there people, might have, certain politics and ideology which they would prefer to bring to the forefront instead of the actual needs of people throughout Africa, or the people in their countries. So it's and that's sort of sometimes the thin line we need to walk on. As you can imagine, it's we obviously, or I can speak for myself. I'm very proud of the fact that I live in Israel and that I'm Israeli. And I wouldn't want that to be in conflict to the work I'm doing in South Africa, and to be in a situation where you're sort of forced to walk on this thin tightrope of, at the end of the day, just trying to do good. It's a little bit frustrating at times, but we try just to stay, clear and focused and true to our mission.
Do you have a different experience in the other African countries, or is South Africa like pretty much a standard African country to deal with? What's your experience?
Are you talking specifically with the Israel
Yeah.
issue, or in
Yeah,
general
the
politics and
Israel issue, do you
ideology?
find that we're more difficult to deal with? Are we more of a challenge? Because, as I said, we took Israel to the ICJ. We have a very specific political agenda when it comes through to the Israeli question. And so the question that I would have is that something you see in the rest of Africa, or are we different in the way that we are?
No, the sensitivities are uniquely South African. The sort of issues we have, and the sensitivities towards our identity as an organization, are unique to South Africa. In a lot of the other countries we go visit, and whenever we go and we complete a project, very often the local communities might even be, they will draw pictures of Israeli flags, and they'll be very proud and grateful to the fact that organizations headquartered in Israel are providing these basic services. So there, it's sort of very the gratitude and the source of where everything is coming from is very much noted, and unfortunately, that's not the case in South Africa.
That's what I thought. Now, we discussed this when I was in Israel, and you were telling me that one of the issues you have is when you create this infrastructure in place, there are numerous instances where you've actually had to take it down because of what we in South Africa refer to as the water mafia. And that's where like local people basically selling water to the villagers through the JoJo tanks, and they don't want you to have that infrastructure in place. Can you talk to me a bit about that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, sort of because of the scope of the projects we've done, as I said, we're close to 1,300 projects. So statistically, you land up seeing lots of things, and because we're working in 6 different countries, so you're exposed to lots of different issues and things which come up, which sort of, it's a statistical thing. The more projects you do, the more you'll encounter these kind of issues. In South Africa, particularly, we do in certain regions have issues of thefts of solar panels, which obviously everything which we're doing is on solar energy. So we do have situations of theft or continuous theft on solar panels. But correctly, we have also had certain issues in areas in South Africa where, and I don't know the official name of the water mafia, but it seems appropriate when they will come and, we will build a relatively large system providing clean drinking water to thousands of people, where a number of individuals will come and sort of just vandalize and destroy our infrastructure, or cut it off to certain areas, or limit the access. We're trying to reach a couple thousands of people, and that will limit the access to only the people within their immediate village, cutting off access to other villages, and then selling the water or other entrepreneurial endeavors they've decided to undertake. So unfortunately, that is something which we do see. To be fair, we have seen things in other countries, but I don't think it is as rampant as it is in South Africa. I do think that South Africa is probably one of the more extreme countries that we do see it. But for the sake of fairness, we do see similar, not in the scope, but we do see similar incidents in other countries as well.
Which, out of curiosity, which countries do you see similar occurrences?
So the thing is this. In all the countries, there's stories in all the countries. Again, we're talking about 1,300 projects throughout Africa, specifically in rural Africa. So, the whole idea of it being in rural Africa does not have, you don't have a strong police force, you do not have, other utilities.
Of course, yeah.
So it's sort of unfortunate that we will see it. So in all the countries, there are different incidents, some less, some more, some more serious, some less so. But where it happens probably the most often, where we are dealing with these kind of issues, is in South Africa. But with that being said, I don't want to sort of paint a bad picture of that. Obviously we love the communities we're working in.
No.
We obviously have managers.
My audience is very aware of the challenges of being in South Africa. So it's not like we don't take it personally, where we're like, oh, this guy's like slacking our country off. Like, no, we're very familiar with the issues. I mean, this idea that we have usually a criminal force that will go into many endeavors, whether it be the construction mafia, where they're building bridges, or whether it be infrastructure or railway lines. There's always some kind of mafia that's like sabotaging the good works of pretty much every organization in existence in South Africa. It's like pretty much the bane of our life. So you're not you're not telling us anything that's going to offend us. Like we know that, like, we live here, so we have to deal with this quite regularly, I'm afraid.
Right. No. So, but I mean, the point I'm making, and I completely agree with you, is that although we sort of in this discussion specifically pointing at more of the negative aspects, it is important to say that we obviously do. I mean, I myself, am South African and was born in South Africa. We obviously all love South Africa, and we do have incredible interactions with the local community. We also do have good partnerships with certain municipalities. But it's just important for me to say that sometimes when you talk about the negative, people love sort of bashing, which unfortunately there is sort of substance there to talk about. But it is important for me to not turn this into sort of like a bashing South Africa session, because that's not my intention at all.
Completely understand. And obviously, for the audience's perspective, as you said, you are actually South African. So you were born in South Africa, but you made Aliyah to Israel, right? So you live in Israel now.
Right. Yeah. And
So
also say that
so you obviously have a connection to the country.
I've still got family in the country, and I studied law in Israel and in South Africa. I was very involved in the Israel-South Africa Chamber of Commerce. I'm still researching legal things specifically regarding, South African legislation. Obviously, part of my work is still in South Africa. So still very connected and and proud of the country in many ways.
Mm. So I'm very curious now. So when this vandalism occurs on the infrastructure you put in place, do you guys report it to the police?
So it depends on the circumstances. Sometimes we do, but sometimes it's something which we just basically try to do as much as possible in-house, in order, if it's things which we are able to fix, with our general maintenance that we're doing. If it's something which is smaller, which we're able to do, because again, the idea is here that we just want to get the problem solved, and we want people to have access to clean water. So if it's something which we believe that we're able to fix either by ourselves, out of our own budget, or if it's something which we can to do together with the local municipality, or with the people in the village, we'll do it. If necessary, we will go to the police. But it's not something which we're trying to, as I saying, we're not trying to look for issues. We're trying to find solutions. If we believe going to the police would solve the issue quicker, then we would obviously be happy to do so. But a lot of the times we feel like either we have the ability, or together with the local community have the ability to resolve it ourselves. And we prefer to do it that way. If we can, again, speak to the local municipality to get their help to resolve it, so we'll do it. But I think our mindset is a lot more solution focused. Whatever are the right steps to bring the solution as quick as possible, that is the path we'll take. And if it needs be going to the police, we'll do so. But
and when you do go to the police, what's the general response? Are they supportive? Do they help? Or are they generally inefficient?
So they will take all of the details and stuff. But to be fair, it's sometimes limited to what they're able to do. You're talking about people who go in the middle of the night and who steal something, or they sometimes aren't able to find out who the person is. So it's sort of a question of expectations as well. What do you expect? What is our expectations of the police, or what is the expectation of the politicians? A lot of the time, they're also limited in their ability to do what we maybe think should be done. To be honest, and this is sort of my own personal take of it. When you go to the police, or once there's already an issue, you're sort of like already too late. So we're dealing with things like after the fact. What should be done in theory is that there should be a feeling of safety throughout the country, so these sort of incidents don't happen. But sort of the nature of the work we're doing is to be honest, it's the same too with water, access to water and to municipal services, basic utilities. These should be things. So we're coming to these areas which don't have them, and we're providing these basic utilities and access to water. So that's our starting point. So the assumption is, if the people don't have access to basic utilities, so they're probably not going to have a strong police force either there in these sort of areas, and therefore most of the time there won't be a strong enough police presence to prevent issues. And then it sort of goes without saying that once an issue has already taken, then the police are probably limited in their ability to find a solution to these issues in these areas.
Yeah, I mean, rural policing is a real problem in South Africa, and obviously it's led to, as you know, it's led to a lot of farmer deaths, and that was one of the things that Trump raised with South Africa when Ramaphosa had his live little television debate with Ramaphosa in the White House. Obviously, farmer deaths are a real thing, and a lot of it kind of comes down to the fact that there is no real rural policing in many of these instances. Like, the police are miles away, and that's even if they have a van that's operational and can actually go to the site. I mean, in many instances they don't, so they're just not coming. Now, you told me about some events where actually you've been asked to take down the infrastructure that you put in place because it's actually caused problems for the local individuals, specifically due to like crimes or gangs that come and going. We don't want that there. And then the communities have been like, look, we want our water, but we're kind of being plagued by what we'd call the water mafia, and you've actually had to take stuff down. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so those are very, very, very upsetting situations. Where basically what will happen is we'll go to one of these rural communities which do not have access to basic clean drinking water. We will, we'll build one of our water systems, providing clean water, drinking water to the entire community, and then the water mafia, or what you call them, or thieves, whoever it will be, that will come and they will steal um, generally the solar panels. And then what sometimes happens is that and sometimes, unfortunately, when they steal the solar panels, they can come quite violently, bearing arms, making threats to the local community. Which again, the local community is just a normal person who just wants to live a normal life and have access, equal opportunity and equality. So what will happen in those circumstances is that we will come and replace those solar panels. But what sometimes unfortunately happens is that every time you replace a solar panel, you'll have someone violently coming into the village and making threats and stealing it. And it's very sad to say, but there'll be circumstances in certain villages where the villagers at a stage will turn to us and say they would actually prefer not to have access to clean drinking water, because they see that every time we come and we fix it, it's just attracting, sort of violent crime and theft to these projects and to these communities. And then with a heavy heart, they'll come to us and they say that, they don't want to risk their families and their lives because of this. And they sort of actually request for us not to repair the systems in order to not continue to attract crime and violence and theft to these communities. Which is something which is deeply sad. It's a situation where you've got a few bad apples who are completely contaminating and influencing the day-to-day quality of lives of thousands of people.
Mm. Yeah, but as you say, that's quite upsetting, and I suppose in many instances a symptom of exactly what's wrong with South Africa, right? I mean, the fact that you can actually put infrastructure in place and you can have crime organizations come through and demand that you take them down. And yes, I can imagine how upsetting this is for the local villagers, because you can live without electricity, but you can't live without water. It's almost like a fundamental need, right? You can even go long periods without food, but you can't go long periods without water. So water is really the fundamental thing, the ingredient that we need to live. So I imagine that the upset that this causes local communities who are having to take it down for basically criminal reasons must be incredibly difficult to deal with.
Yeah, to be honest, sort of my outlook is it's not only sad for us as an organization or for those particular communities, but as humanity. And I know this sounds sort of airy-fairy, but it should be sad for all of us, because even in the South African Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, the citizens of South Africa do have a basic right of access to water.
Mm.
And if the governments are not able to provide that access to clean water as they're required to do in the Constitution, so you've got an external NGO coming to do it, and they're also having their difficulties, due to some bad apples. But as I said, it's important to realize that this is definitely by far the minority of these sort of incidents in the projects, which we see. As I said, if we see approximately 150 projects in South Africa, this is not a high percentage of them. It's not. We obviously continue to work in the country, and we want to reach as many people as possible. And it's a matter of statistics. The more projects you build, the more you sort of are exposed to these kind of things. But in the few incidents that it does happen, it is deeply upsetting to us as an organization, to the people in the village. And I sort of think of South Africa as a whole, because as you said, people need water to drink. But not only do they need water to drink, that not having access to clean water makes people sick. In order to get access to water, they'll start drinking contaminated water. They'll start walking far distances, risking themselves in the far distances with thieves, with animals, with falling, and all of this kind of stuff. And it's sort of preventing the much needed development and progress of the entire country, because once someone's got access to water, so then they can maybe start agriculture. Once you've got agriculture, they can start eating properly and start, looking after this healthcare. Once you've got people who are healthy and with access to water, they can start farming. Once you start farming, you can start selling. You can start and then it's sort of like the entire progress of humanity, or as these villages can sort of start. But if we don't give the rural population a fighting chance to even start, then it's going to eventually hold back not only that community but the entire country, because it's just preventing the development of the entire country. Because the rural population is not a small population. And I actually see recently, and I just sort of wrote something here which I thought was interesting. So Stats SA earlier this year in 2025, they did their 2024 general household survey, where they basically went house to house to find out, the situation of, taking various factors into consideration. But what I was exceptionally surprised to see, but when they asked rural communities, how many of them have access to safely managed water, the number was 36.7%. So in rural communities in South Africa, stats taken from the 2024 General Household Survey published by Stats SA, only 36.7% of residents in rural South Africa have access to safely managed water. And what was even more interesting to me is that even in urban South Africa, so now we're not even talking rural, we're talking urban, the percentage of people in urban South Africa who have access to safely managed water is only 71.8%, which I also think is exceptionally low. Now we're already talking about urban areas. We're not even talking about rural areas, which you can make.
Yeah, we actually had this where I live. So what had happened is that the water in Nelson Mandela Bay actually got polluted. I forget how, but they were telling everybody we actually had to boil the water before it was safe to consume. So I mean, it's a thing. It's a real thing, even in the cities. Now you'll know Joburg has been without water for some time.
Yeah. 100%. So what they say in this thing, which was actually exceptional to see, talk about the development of a country, is they talk about the access to safe water, to safely manage water in the past year in 4 provinces in South Africa have actually decreased. And that sort of goes in line with what you're saying now. So, and which is obviously surprising, because if you're talking about a developing country, the key word here being developing, you're assuming that the situation is increasing and getting better as time goes on. But seeing that 4 provinces in South Africa that in the urban areas that access to safely managed water has actually decreased, again, I think is something which is very upsetting, and which is somewhat connected to the government's how they deal with infrastructure and their policies, policies and legislation regarding infrastructure and the maintenance of that national infrastructure.
As you say, a very ongoing issue though in South Africa, and I'm still curious. So when you're asked to take this infrastructure down, are these instances that you report to the police? And if you do, what's their approach? Because we see in many instances, right, that sometimes the police are actually in league with the criminals. And so you kind of go to the police and you say, can you assist? This happens with the construction mafia a lot. You go there and you say, can you assist? They're stopping me from doing work. And the police are like, what do you want us to do? Do you have a similar experience?
So again, it sort of depends on so if we think that the police will be able to deal with it, if we do think that the police will be helpful and able to find a solution, then we'll do so. But very often the community say to us that they actually don't want to draw attention to themselves. They don't want to turn this into a big thing.
So no police.
And again, we sort of, if we do not believe it will help, then we won't do it. Even though sort of with my lawyer's hat on, you want systems to work properly. In order for systems to work properly, you need to respect the systems and to respect them and to go through the procedures. But as an organization, we focus on just getting to the correct, to help the end users, to make sure that as many people get access to safe water as possible. Obviously, the safety of everyone is the utmost importance to us. So we sort of not looking to resolve all of the issues. We're not looking to cause any problems. And so therefore, if a community says to us that they do not want this attention, they believe that the infrastructure does cause these issues, then we will take it down and not necessarily go to the police if the community, if that's the will of the community. Because as I said, that it's the project we do together with the community. So it's not just us deciding and the community taking a back seat. We want them to take ownership. We want them to feel a part of it. We want it to be sustainable. So as a general comment, sustainability can't solely fall on the shoulders of external third parties. The people who are benefiting are the ones who actually need to take ownership of it. So a lot of the times it's not our place to sort of make the end decision of the best way to deal with it, because we want the local community to take ownership. We want them to, and we will respect the decision they made. And in the few incidents where it happens, so we'll sort of make that decision together with the community of what they believe is the best approach for the safety of the people in the village.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad. It's sad because unfortunately we see this a lot in South Africa, like the good intentions. There's a lot that we could do in the country, and unfortunately bad governance and bad political ideology kind of stops a lot of people kind of progressing. And the words you said are actually 100% correct. Most people just want to live an ordinary life. They're not interested in, politics or ideology or who's friends with who. They just want water. They want a job. They want a home. They want to raise their kids in peace. And that's like everybody. And unfortunately, a lot of good work that parties such as yourself does, unfortunately, gets swept aside. And you would hope that the government would take it seriously and actually be more proactive in assisting companies like you for providing services that they themselves cannot do. But unfortunately, that's not what we always see, I'm afraid.
Well, when I think of the government in general, but South Africa specifically, I sort of see that in my mind, I see there's two issues. Number one, sometimes they've actually just got bad policies. Sometimes their policies are just bad and are not good enough. And there's sort of like an issue at the core of what they're doing or what their outlook is. But there's other issues where and this often happens in South Africa, and I don't think we sort of go into the details enough. Sometimes the policy is actually not bad, or the legislation is actually quite good, but it's the implementation of it that's the issue. So you might actually have great policies or great legislation which has been written and are very forward thinking and and would be really good for the country, but the issue becomes on the implementation stage. Which was sort of politicians to sort of deliver on the promises they make, which becomes an issue. It's like it's like the one sentence someone told me: political promises are like babies; they're fun to make but difficult to deliver. And sometimes it's the delivering of these policies which is the issue.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually on to the last minute, so I've got to thank you for your time. I know we had a little bit of fun setting up this interview, but thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and my audience about everything that you're doing. And I really hope that you continue to push forward and really do really positive things for South Africa as a whole.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.